Hi, hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Bekah Jo, aka the Makeup Tax Lady. Today, I am so excited and I am loving that we are doing two separate eye looks and face swatches of the Ensley Rain Flourish and Flutter palettes. On this side of my face, I did a look and face swatches with the Flourish palette. And on this side of my face, I did an eye look and swatches with the Flutter palette. These palettes are sold separately, so please don't feel obligated to be interested in both of them if you're not. Totally okay. They obviously have very different vibes to them. I personally love both of these palettes. I can't wait to tell you about it in this video, so let's get right on into it. Hello there. I am so excited to get into today's fun makeup. Let me just start off with sharing with you what I have on my face. I have my Glossier foundation all over my face, Natasha Denona under eye corrector just under my eyes, RCMA no color powder to set everything on my face, Sydney Grace clear stronghold brow gel through my brows, About Face eyeshadow primer on my lids, and Sydney Grace lip topper in the shade Danny on my lips because they've just been dry lately. I am so excited to play with the Flourish and Flutter palettes today. My plan is to do one eye look with the Flourish palette, one eye look with the Flutter palette, and then do face swatches on the coordinating side. Obviously, you don't have to purchase both of these palettes in a bundle. You can purchase them separately if you're only interested in one or the other. I just thought that since they're a little bit smaller, more curated palettes, and they were released together, it made sense to just kind of pair them together in a video. But if you're only interested in one half, or maybe none at all, and you're just here to hang out, thanks for being here today. I want to get started with the Flourish palette. This is the more bright, more colorful of the two palettes. When I look at this palette, I am so inspired. I love the bright colors in this palette. I get like so giddy when I think about or look at this palette. That said, one of the shades that I reach for probably the least, which maybe is a little bit surprising because it's one of the more neutral shades in the palette, is the palette namesake Flourish, this like orange peachy shade. There's nothing wrong with that shade. I just really love pinks and purples and greens. So those are the shades that I tend to reach for with this palette. But I think I want to play with Flourish today. I also think I want to play with Fairy Flutter. This shimmer is just a little bit intimidating to me, so let's see if we can play with it today and get a little more comfortable with it. Of course, I want to use Caligna, the deep brown down here, to deepen up the look. And I want to pull in one of the pops of color in another way, but I'm not totally sure yet. So I'm gonna start with Flourish and a fluffy brush and put this through the crease on my right side. I pretty much never start eyeshadow on my right eye. I always start it on my left eye, so we're already changing things up. The way that the mattes from Ensley Rain blend out is just so delightful to me. It just makes me so happy. I'm gonna take this angled brush from Sierra Martin and dip into Caligna and put this on the outer portion of my eye. That was one dip in the pan. I'm gonna go back in with a second dip just to build up that pigment a little bit more. Taking that same shade on this Sydney Grace shader brush, and my eye is just a little bit watery, but I'm gonna bring this Caligna down to my lower lash line and connect it out here in the outer corner. I go back in once more with the shade Flourish and that fluffy brush. As far as like orangey peachy shades go, it's not orange shades that I struggle with, although I have not been interested in wearing like warm tones at all for the last month or so. It's particularly peach shades, and I don't know if I could explain like the color combinations that make up a peach shade that I struggle with. It's just that if it's a light enough tone and then it has that warmth to it, there's just something about it that I tend to not like that with my skin tone. So nothing particular against this shade, just kind of a personal preference with shades that I do reach for. Okay, without using a glitter glue or anything, I want to reach into Fairy Flutter with my fingertip. This is definitely a more flaky textured shade, and I'm sure that's part of the reason that I struggle just like knowing how to use it. That is not to say that it is unusable or difficult to use. The flip on this is beautiful, but it has a little bit more of a deeper base, especially compared to all of the other shades in this palette, but the flip is so strong. Okay, I'm gonna add this to the outer like half of my lid. I didn't add anything more to this brush. I'm just using the brush to kind of soften the edges. I may have picked up a little bit too much for the small area where I was placing it. The base color and like the reflection colors in that shade blend in so well with those two mattes. I'm gonna make a call on the fly here. I like the direction that we're going. I'm gonna use 2 more shimmers on the lid. I want to use both Nectar and Sunbeam. I think I want to use Sunbeam on the inner portion of my lid and then Nectar kind of in the middle to bridge between the 2 shades. You will see full-blown swatches of all of these in just a moment, but I have the shade Nectar, which is the like pinky peachy shade here. This color of peach, don't have a problem with it. Not at all. I love this shade. So I'm gonna take this just in the center. Maybe part of it is because of the like flip on that shade. And now I'm gonna dip into Sunbeam, which is just a gorgeous, brilliant shade. It has so much impact. Each one of these shades has so much impact. Wiped off my finger and I'm just kind of going between each of those shimmers. I'm gonna dip back into Nectar just a little bit, just to make sure we don't lose that one. I can't be stopped. I'm taking this Sierra Martin brush and I wanna dip into this beautiful green shade, Petal Pop, and use that to like finish out the lower lash line. I'm gonna use the same brush and dip into Buttercup Bliss and add that to the inner corner and lower lash line. I'm going to do the final touches on this eye and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are with the Flourish palette on my right eye. I think that these colors are so pretty, and let me tell you what I used. So to finish off this eye look, I used LA Girl liner in the shade Brown. I used this in my waterline, and then just like the outer corner of my top waterline, on my lower waterline, I put on top of Brown this ColourPop BFF Cream Gel Liner Multichrome in the shade Movie Star. I just thought that having the brown under this would give it a little bit more depth, and I think it did that. So those were the liners that I used. My mascara was my Smashbox Superfan mascara. Now let's get into our Flutter look. So the Flutter palette is the more grungy, more earthy tones, I would say, between the 2 palettes. Obviously, Flourish is very colorful, and there's still some color in Flutter. There's not a lack of color, it's just that these are more grounded tones, I would say, overall. Now, you might guess that this peachy shade is one that I don't reach for often, and you would be correct by that. But because we used a similar orangey shade on this eye, I'm not gonna make this the star of the show. Not saying I won't use it, but it's not gonna be the focus. I think for starting off my look with the Flutter palette, I want to dip into Magic Moss. I have only used this particular shade like a couple times and it's beautiful. It's such a pretty grungy, earthy, yellowy green shade, and it's so pretty. So I'm going to start with using this shade. I'm taking my Sydney Grace angled brush into Magic Moss, and we're gonna start this on the outer corner of my eye and then pull it in through the crease. I am using a fluffy brush to pull this through the crease, also Sydney Grace brush. And that blended so beautifully into the crease. Now I want to take this Sydney Grace denser fluffy brush. It's hard to explain. It's an E13. I love this brush for outer corner work. I'm gonna dip into this dark gray shade Echo and use this to deepen up the outer corner. I'm not focusing a whole lot on the blending on the lid because we're gonna cover that up with a shimmer, although it is satisfying to blend out a shade. Sydney Grace shader brush into the same shade Echo and going to connect that to my lower lash line. With this Sigma E27, I'm gonna dip back into Magic Moss just to add in that color a little bit. I covered quite a bit of it up with Echo, so I wanna add just a bit of it to the outer portion up here. With that Sydney Grace shader brush, I'm like brushing these all off on this little shade switchamaroo in between shades, by the way. So if I'm using the same brush, it's been cleaned off by that before I pick up the next shade. But I'm gonna go into the shade Wisp, which is this beautiful purpley shade, and we're gonna go for a grungy lower lash line. With this fluffy Give Me Glow brush, G616, I'm going to dip into Orchard Orange and add this to like the inner portion of my crease, but very fluffed out, nothing too concentrated. Okay, I have two shades that I think I want to use on the lid, but I'm going to start with one and then we'll decide from there if I want to go for the other. So I'm going to start with the shade Dewdrop and add that to the 2/3 of my lid. I'm gonna go ahead and put this shade all over my lid. I'm kind of building it up too. It's a little bit more sheer, so the more I add onto my lid, the more impact it has. Oh, the sparkles in that shade. I hope you'll be able to see it. I do want to dip into the shade Pixie Petal and add that to the lower lash line. I'm gonna try using my finger and I may grab for a brush and then spray it. We'll see how this goes. That shade is so sparkly and metallic. Okay, I'm gonna go do finishing touches on this eye and I'll be right back. Okay, so here is the final look with the Flutter palette. I think this turned out so pretty. I was like feeling a deep berry lip tonight, so I had to add that. First, in the waterline on this eye, I used this LA Girl Shockwave Neon Eyeliner in the shade Vivid, and I didn't add anything to the top waterline. I used the same Smashbox Superfan Mascara. On my lips, I have Give Me Glow Lip Liner in Sweater Weather and NYX Butter Gloss in the shade Cranberry Pie on my lips. I have had this for so long, but it still smells nice, and I don't typically wear it, but I think it looks really pretty. I will say, not that I think anything that I used on the Flourish side is bad, but I like the kind of simplicity of the Flutter that I just used one shimmer on the top and one on the bottom. And while I think any of the shimmer shades on the Flourish side would have been beautiful all over the lid, I'm kind of wishing that's the direction I had gone. We will walk through right now just how much I love the shimmer shades, so it's not a knock in any way against them. I just like giving them their own moment to shine over the entire lid. Same order, let's start with the Flourish palette, and then let's grab the shimmer shades, swatch them on my cheek, and then we'll bring the matte shades up onto my forehead. So we're gonna start with the shades Nectar, Buttercup Bliss, and Sunbeam. Here on my fingers, we have Nectar, Buttercup Bliss, and Sunbeam. Buttercup Bliss is incredibly smooth to the touch. Nectar is also smooth, but it has a very like finely milled powder texture to it. It's not like the flaky, creamy texture, if that makes sense. It doesn't move around in the pan. It's very smooth. It's just a little different type of smoothness than Buttercup Bliss. And then Sunbeam has a little bit of texture to it, but you can see that it smooths out very beautifully. I never managed to give myself as much room as I think I have on my cheeks. So we have, again, Nectar, Buttercup Bliss, and Sunbeam. If you know anything about my channel, hi, I'm Bekah Jo, the Makeup Tax Lady, and I love Ensley Rain. If you know anything about my makeup preferences, you're going to see that both of these palettes have so many shimmers that make my heart go pitter-pat. these three exhibit A quite literally. The shade Nectar here with kind of the orange base to it with that beautiful pink flash. I love this shade. Buttercup Bliss has these really pretty shifts to it. It's got like a green base with yellow and pink, and it really goes with so much of everything. This shade also makes for a really pretty highlighter on the cheek. Sunbeam is a beautiful, I haven't worn it yet, but it would be a beautiful one and done. It's got kind of a tan base with this beautiful soft gold reflect. It's not like a strong yellow gold, and lots of sparkle. Next, let's dip into Dahlia Magic, Garden Glow, and Fairy Flutter. Here on my fingers, we have Dahlia Magic, Garden Glow, and Fairy Flutter. Dahlia Magic and Garden Glow are just smooth as can be, very similar to Buttercup Bliss in texture. Fairy Flutter has a little bit more texture to it, but it's got this beautiful copper flash to it. Dahlia Magic is such a cool shade to me, and I think it's because it's kind of a pink and red shade. I do really like pinks, and it's got this beautiful shine to it. It just kind of like sucks you in. I don't know if it's just like it's on my skin tone, but I think that shade is so pretty. Garden Glow is pretty much an iridescent, but it's that like green, soft green, not a seafoam green. Similar to the base of Buttercup Bliss is the flash that we have in Garden Glow. And that shade, I love it. One of my favorite shades in my entire collection. I love it so much. Fairy Flutter, hopefully you're seeing, it's got this like gray base to it, but this really pretty orange copper flash to it with lots of sparkle, lots of impact. Okay, let's start the matte process on my forehead. We've got the shades Begonias, Flourish, and Petal Pop. And the last three shades in this palette, we have Thistle, Pink Paradise, and Caligna. So Caligna, now that I have it blended out a little bit, you can see it kind of has this purpley berry base to it, but it's just a very dark brown. It's really pretty. I think it goes with the other mattes in this palette very well. The pops of color show up on my skin tone. I'm a light skin tone, a fair skin tone, but I think that the pigmentation and the punch of color that these shades have is just so exciting to me. I can make them look like they do in the pan on my lids. I've learned that with these bright shades, the more you blend them out, especially these two, the pink and purple, they blend away just a little bit into my skin tone is probably what it is. I think that's just the nature of the pigments in those colors. I don't think it's a formulation thing, and I'm not complaining. It just changes a little bit the methodology which I use the shades. So if I want them a little bit more blended out, I just blend. And if I want them a little bit punchier, I do more stamping motions. I think they're so pretty and they're so fun and they're very easy to work with. I don't find them getting patchy when I use them or anything like that. So here are all the swatches of the Flourish palette. Now let's jump to the other side and get into the Flutter palette. Starting off, we have Pixie Petal, Golden Hour, and Moonflower. Here on my fingers, we have Pixie Petal, Golden Hour, and Moonflower. Pixie Petal is a chunkier texture, although I find it smooths out a little bit more than this shade from the Flourish palette, Fairy Flutter. But it has a very similar texture. Golden Hour is smooth, but not quite as smooth as like Moonflower, for example. Still very pretty and not necessarily chunky, just that's kind of the texture on my finger. Moonflower is one of those shades that if I don't know what to wear that day, Moonflower's a perfect option. So again, we have Pixie Petal, which when smoothed out just has this pop, this flash to it of a beautiful like purpley cool toned pink with a base that's a little bit more gray base, again similar to Fairy Flutter. Golden Hour has this blue turquoise base to it, and then this phenomenal pop of orange. Moonflower is a brownie maroon kind of base with a silvery green pop of sparkle to it. These two shades, especially as one and dones, would be beautiful. Our next three shades, we have Dewdrop, Sylph, and Mystic Meadow. Here on my fingers, we have Dewdrop, Sylph, and Mystic Meadow. These are all very smooth. Sylph maybe has a little bit more of that like almost powdery feel that Nectar has in the Flourish palette. Forgive me, I just sneezed. So again, we have Dewdrop, Sylph, and Mystic Meadow. The three shades here, and even Moonflower here, have a subtle base to them. Sylph, you can see, has a little bit more of a mustard base. Dewdrop is more blue. Mystic Meadow is pretty almost iridescent. It's a very light tan base. And then Moonflower, like I said, has kind of a brownie maroon base to it. And then they all have this beautiful sparkly flash to them. We've got more green, more blue, more of like a green, but it's on the blue base, so it kind of pulls more teal. Moonflower is definitely more like silver green compared to these other three. These four shades in particular as one and dones would be great. You could throw Golden Hour easily into that mix of easy one and dones, but the like, I guess duochromeness, the flash and sparkle that these shades have is right up my alley. Okay, mattes, we have Orchard Orange, Serenity, and Magic Moss. And our last three mattes to swatch, we have Flicker, Wisp, and Echo. So we can see that Echo is really a deep gray shade, our deep purple shade that very nicely complements the shade from the Flourish palette. Flicker is a gray shade with a hint of green in there. And then we've got our yellow Magic Moss. Serenity is a different shade of green than Petal Pop. Petal Pop is more punchy, more limey. It's got more yellow to it. Serenity is a softer green shade. And then Orchard Orange compared to Flourish, it's definitely softer, blends into my skin tone pretty well, and just doesn't have as much pigmentation to it. So as for my thoughts and conclusions on both of these palettes, personally, I love having both of these palettes in my collection. Like I mentioned earlier on, I find so much inspiration from the Flourish palette. I sometimes find so much inspiration that I add more shades to my lid than probably necessary, but I don't really care because I'm playing and I love so much the Flourish palette, the excitement that I get from it, and all of the shades in the palette. I don't necessarily use all of them together or all of them on a daily basis because they're definitely more colorful, and on the day-to-day I'm usually going into the office for work, so I'm not going for like the punchy colorful looks, but I use this in makeup playtime all of the time, and these are shades that I probably wouldn't naturally reach for. Also, the packaging, the bright pink with the teal is like it gets me, like it knows me. I literally keep this out on my makeup workspace here, my vanity, because it so excites me just to see the colors in this palette. I find so much inspiration just seeing this palette, whether the outside, the inside, I'm a huge fan. I also love that these are magnetic and I can mix and match if I really want to. The Flutter palette, while the packaging is beautiful, it doesn't like excite me in the same way that the Flourish palette does, which is totally okay. The shades on the inside, I think, are absolutely beautiful as well. When I got the two palettes, I definitely expected to love Flourish more. When I ordered them, I wasn't sure what to think. When I got them in the mail, I thought I would love Flourish more than Flutter. On the day-to-day, I'm definitely reaching for Flutter more because these shades are so easy to wear, because they're so simple but impactful. A lot of the times I'm reaching for Flicker and I run this very lightly through the crease. I pop one of these 4 shimmer shades on the lid, and then I'll take Wisp or Echo and make a little bit of a liner. I have done that so many times. I'm not really an eyeshadow look repeater, but I have repeated that formula with this palette so many times. I don't tend to reach for these 3 shades. They're a little bit more colorful for the day-to-day. And while this Magic Moss shade is very pretty, and Serenity is one of those shades that I really, really like the tonality of that shade, they're just not ones that I reach for on like the day I'm going into the office. I think we have a beautiful collection of colorful and everyday type of shades. I think the size of the palette is so great, and they have a little bit of like weight to them. You guys know that I love my Ensley Rain palettes, and I've really been loving their Moon Dusts lately, their loose pigments. You know that I love their palettes. These 2 palettes I reach for all the time. They are just so perfect for a simple 2 or 3 shadow look. The formulas are beautiful. All of the shimmer shades except for one in each palette is incredibly smooth, which on the day-to-day, it's just much easier to use a smoother formula that I don't have to worry about flakes falling all over my face or whatever. Not that I don't love those flakier shades, I just don't reach for them unless I know I have time to, you know, manipulate them and make them work for me. But so many of the other shades, I don't have to worry about that. I can reach into maybe my Cosmic Dreamer palette or another palette for the mattes if I want a little something different for the mattes than what these palettes offer, and then go in with these shimmer shades and they last all day. They're beautiful. I'm not exactly sure by the time this palette goes up what they'll have on the site, but they have been having both of these palettes on sale on Ensley Rain's website. I'll make sure that their site is linked down below if you are interested. It's not an affiliated link. I don't get paid for any of my YouTube activities at this point. I just really enjoy makeup. I spend my own money on my makeup because I really just enjoy it. And I really just enjoy Ensley Rain. Please let me know in the comments which of the 2 looks was your favorite. Do you have a favorite like go-to shadow combination with these palettes, either together or from one of the palettes, or maybe you're mixing in another palette? Do you have either the Flourish or the Flutter palette? And if so, do you get as much use out of it as you thought you would? I have never allowed myself to do an Ensley Rain palette ranking because I just don't want to play favorites. That's silly, I know, but I really don't want to. I love each of my Ensley Rain palettes for one reason or another. I love these both so much. I would love to hear any thoughts that you may have in the comment section if you have any questions that I didn't answer during the video. If you like this format of video, I have done this with all but 2 now of the Ensley Rain palettes that I have, where I do a look and face swatches. I really enjoy just like getting to know these palettes and then using the surface area of my face to show you and talk you through what I think about them and how I've been using them. So if you enjoy this style of video, I'll make sure that my Ensley Rain playlist is linked in the description. Besides all of that, if you liked the video, I hope that you'd give the video a like. If you are new to my channel, I'd love it if you'd consider becoming a subscriber. We are almost to 500, and I thank you so much for being here for today's video, and I hope that you stick around. I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks so much.